내 이름은 슈퍼! 그럼요! 언제나 yes, 오늘도 환한 미소 에너지 나를 찾는 부탁엔 언제나 yes, 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 yes. 낮에도 yes, 밤에도 시도 때도 없어도 어두운 밤을 밝히는 무언가 yes, 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 yes. 우주를 넘고 바다를 건너 당신 곁에 갈게요. 어디든지 내 이름 부를 때면 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 거절은 하지 않나 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 당신이 부르면 언제라도 바람처럼 나타나 들어줄게요 폭풍처럼 나타나 슈퍼 그럼요 걱정은 no 눈물도 걱정하지 마세요 당신 곁을 지키는 수호천사 yes 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 바람이 불고 눈물을 칠 때 그날은 좀 쉴게요 도대체 왜 그때도 바쁜 거야 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 거절은 하지 않나 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 당신이 부르면 언제라도 바람처럼 나타나 들어줄게요 폭풍처럼 나타나 슈퍼 그럼요 마음이 힘들 땐 어깨를 빌려줄게요 부담은 가지지 마라 기대봐요 보답을 하고 싶다면 환하게 웃어주세요 그거면 난 충분하니까 당신의 힘이 되어주는 사람 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 거절은 하지 않나 내 이름 슈퍼 슈퍼 그럼요 당신이 부르면 언제라도 바람처럼 나타나 들어줄게요 폭풍처럼 나타나 슈퍼 그럼요
Good evening and welcome back to Shenzhen, bingling noise, where we left ourselves halfway through two separate projects because they both looked rather difficult, and I was encouraged to think on what to do in order to deal with the difficult bits of each of them, and I have some ideas for the cocktail mixer. So the thing we had observed before was we have 6 things we want to produce, and conveniently if we encode the ingredients as 2 3-digit numbers, then we can store the precise set of precisely the correct number of bits of information in one ROM chip, which feels like that's how it's designed to go. What's that random island doing there? Pink. Right. But the problem was that I couldn't come up with a way to nicely dispense the right amount of each ingredient. And so I spent some time pondering this.
I'm hoping that the actual lemon causes an entire lemon to be emitted.
I spent some time pondering this, and had various ideas, but they all seemed to require changing the ROM encoding in ways that won't fit. But I think I've come up with a combination that might work. Of course, I've done it all in my head, so whether this will actually come out of my head again is another matter. So a thing I observed was that, and I haven't looked back at the circuit board after checking this in the manual, is that there are mutually exclusive pairs of ingredients. So I believe there is no drink that includes both gin and vodka, for instance. And there is no... Ooh, and now I'm looking at the layout. I think this may be deliberate. There is no drink that includes both lemon and lime, and there is no drink that includes both cranberry and vermouth. Therefore, we could have an MC4000 using the pulse generator instruction with one output wired to... with one of its two output wire, with one MC4000 for each of those pairs, with one output wired to each ingredient in that pair, and then it would just use a pulse generator instruction on one or other output, and that makes its code really simple. We don't have any faffing around decrementing counters. We don't have to keep track of two separate things we're trying to dispense. It's just one instruction to dispense cranberry, one instruction to dispense vermouth. So that's the idea, but the problem is that the natural encoding of that says we want 3 numbers per cocktail, one for each of the dispensing processors, and that of course is 21 entries, which we can't fit into a ROM. So my kind of then idea is we stick with something approximating the current encoding and take advantage of the fact that we've probably got about 6 spare instructions in each of these processors to muck around decoding them. Then, of course, we have questions like where are we going to get all the necessary XBus ports, and I'm really not sure about that. So I think we've concluded that my design for these processors was complete rubbish, so let's just destroy those ones and drop these off the board as well and try the new idea, whereas the stuff on the left is probably not completely wrong. In particular, the ROM contents is probably right, though we may have to shuffle all the digits around. So then the idea is we have 3 MC4000s. So the question is, can we actually fit the wiring in for this? Because what I want is for this one to have one of its P ports wired to cranberry and one to vermouth, which surely is going to require something like... That's not going to fit. Okay. Move it 1 square to the left then. That. Oh, we can do better than that, can't we? We can at least route that one that way, so that we can get an X0 on there, if nothing else. So then the second one needs to connect to both lemon and lime. But the tricky thing is that these are kind of going to have to be lined up quite spaced out, because we need to get, if we stick this one here, then it's going to obviously need to occupy those 2 rows. Except that it's going to need to occupy some space up here as well to get a track past it to get to P0. At which point it will occupy one of these, and we can't get 2 tracks out there. So we probably have to move things. There's clearly a reason why we have so much space on this board, which is that we're going to have to shift everything quite a long way leftwards. So like possibly we stick that processor all the way over there. And again, we can't get round this one, so this one has to go like there. And that assumes that we're not using X1 on any of those processors. And I have a horrible feeling I do want to use X1 on them, so I may have to move them even further left. But this isn't actually a problem. Like, we've still got half the circuit board available. So I think I actually want to daisy chain the X-bus ports together. Not many instructions though, and it's that, or we need something that has 3 X-bus outputs, which is going to require an entire extra processor probably, which might be feasible. But I think these will now have plenty of spare instructions. I think. No, wrong one. That's interesting. That doesn't actually connect to X0 if it goes that way. That means you can run quite a lot of tracks through these if you're through the legs of a chip if you're careful. Anyway, so then something like the idea, and let's go for the simple one at the end, is no, actually, let's not go for the simple one at the end. Let's go for... So, I'm probably going to have to change the format of the ROM, but we'll worry about that in a bit. We could do something like... let's put in those 2 moves. So then, if we have the third, oh no, hang on, we don't want to copy 2 bytes through. What we want actually, if we say the first byte, this is going to require rewriting the ROM, but that's fine. If we say that the first byte is vodka, gin, and something, then we start by reading that. So mov x0 ac. But the third byte of that will need to be passed on. The third digit of that will need to be passed on. So we'll need to do that. And we'll also want to pass on the second byte. Then we can go is ac greater than 99, which means the top digit of ac is set, which means we want vodka. So then we say, if it is, get digit number 2 from the accumulator and generate a pulse on P0 of length accumulator. Otherwise, get digit 1 from the accumulator and generate a pulse on P1 of length accumulator, only we have to provide another argument, don't we, which is just 0. Essentially, and then turn off for 0 time because we don't care. Well, that looks pretty simple. And that was... Well, that one's got all of the copying code in it and doesn't seem to be running out of space, so that's nice. So that says in our new configuration... Oops. Let's actually write it as ABC, DEF to avoid confusion between numbers and variables. A is vodka and B is gin. Right. So the second processor has the lemon and lime pins wired to it. So let's have this one be essentially the same as the first processor. So that means that we're going to have D be lemon and E be lime. So the first byte is of no interest to this processor at all. Just copy that through. The second byte is of interest. And actually, since this is going to be precise, almost exactly the same as this, I realise, apart from swapping the two. You can't do middle button paste in this game. Bah.
Well,
Right.
Probably their control system is made by MC4000 programmed by the low-paid.
So we swap around which of the two. Is that the right thing? Yes. No, that's not the right thing at all, Ben. So we copy through the first byte, then read the second byte into the accumulator, copy that through, and then do the same buggering around that we did before, and therefore the top bit goes to top thing goes to P0, the next one goes to P1. Right, so two processors programmed. This one, on the other hand, is different because this one has to look at the bottom byte of each bottom digit of each byte. So it's going to say that C is cranberry and F is vermouth.
I didn't realise suffering from a bit of a turmeric.
Good. Right, so... Oh, we're going to need... Of course, we need at the beginning of all of these an SLX-X0, so that fills in our one missing instruction. Let's put those in while I remember. So this one wants to read both of the things into the accumulator. This is going to be quite expensive, actually. Maybe this has to end up being an MC6000. That's going to screw up my board layout. Because this one has to go, get out the low order digit. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, you idiot, Harris. You don't need any conditions here. Just emit one zero length pulse and one non-zero length pulse. Much simpler. Get digit 0, emit a pulse on P0, AC 0. Then do those same three instructions again. Emitting to P1. Right, there we go. That probably means I can simplify these by not bothering with, like, tests. I just go... Like, that's a mess anyway. Oh no, because those are both... That should be a minus there. Those are both reading from the same accumulator, and so they'll corrupt the accumulator. Right, okay, those do have to be like that. Right. Rubs hands enthusiastically. Right, let's get a new ROM and transcribe with all the necessary digit transpositions into it. So 0. So that 300, 000, 300 is just 3 vodka. So that turns into 300000. The next one is 0000602. So that's 3 vodka, which means 600, and 2 lemon, which means that the next one has to say 200. Right. Then the next one is 220, which is 2 lime, 2 cranberry. So 2 lime, 2 cranberry looks like 220. And 4, which is 4 lemon, which then looks like an extra 400 on there, which makes that 420. Then 40, 400, so that's 4 cranberry, which is 4. 400 is 4 vodka, which makes that 404 and 0. 2 600, 2 means 2 vermouth, which becomes 2 in the second entry, and 600 is 6 vodka, which becomes 600 in the first entry. 200 is 2 lime, which is 20 in the second one. 60 is 6 gin, which is 60 in the first one. Uh, 2 followed by 60 means 2 vermouth, which is 2 in the second entry, and 60 means 6 gin, which is 60 in the first entry. Right, so that's the new ROM programmed. It's probably correct. So now that ROM, what did this chip do? It waits for some input from X1. It then expects X2 and X3 to be wired up to the ROM, and X0 to be wired into the do I need to move the ROM out of the way? Yes, I actually want the ROM right next to this, don't I? And then the only problem is that X0 gets messy, so let's move that sideways a bit. There we are. What? Oh. Yes, okay, I can't do that because I actually need that X0. Right. So then that reads from thing, move to ACK, sub1, mul 2, move to X3, which is the address port. Then copy 2 bytes from X2 to X0 and then loop. Right, so that's the code in that is all still correct. Excellent. Right, well, let's see if that works. Oh, look, it crashed. I think. Right. Right, yes. There's a slight problem. Disagreements. This chip doesn't read both of its inputs right at the start. It reads one of them later. This is not good because this one's trying to write both of its outputs right at the start. That's unhelpful. What does the digit set command, instruction do? I think it's really unhelpful, as I recall. So, ooh, no, that's not very helpful. Ooh, I may have to experiment a bit, because DST takes set the digit of ACK specified by the first operand to the value of the second operand. So you can actually read something in and extract one digit from it and stick it in the accumulator. Which could, in theory, mean that I can read both of those bytes by doing mov thing ACK, DST thing ACK, DST thing x naught rather. Mov x naught ACK, DST number x naught. Let's, so the problem at the moment is that essentially we get to here and then this one is generating an output of cranberry as it should be, good, and it's thus not going to read the second byte in time, which is unfortunate. So if I kind of like to test that everything else is working correctly. So actually what I can do is just comment out those instructions for now. Right. So essentially never emit anything from that last one. So that will obviously give errors in that we will never correctly emit vermouth. Right, we have another problem, which is that when someone pressed 3, we emitted lemon when we were meant to what? When someone pressed 3, we emitted completely the wrong thing. Okay. Let's check the ROM contents. So yes, so they pressed 3 and nothing very helpful happened. 3 is meant to emit a cosmopolitan, which is meant to be 2 vodka, 4, in our counting, 4 vodka, 2 lime, 2 cranberry. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 4. Oh, we appear to be emitting 4 lemon, 2 lime. Well, that's not going to work anyway. So that should be 4 vodka and 2 cranberry and 2 lime. Who knows what I was thinking when I typed that in. Right, so now all of the errors are in the bottom 2 outputs, which are the ones where my first attempt at programming it failed. But other than that, the other 2 are working correctly, so that's nice. Somewhat. So one trivial way to solve this is drop in the expensive processor, take advantage of the fact that it has 2 registers. Then we can read both values into the registers and process them as we see fit. Yes. Yes. So they indicate what button the user has just pressed. So we need this thing to I mean, technically we can improve matters a bit by doing that, of course. That will then give us all but one of the outputs working correctly. Yes, excellent. Now our only problem is that we never put any cranberry in anything.
I don't think this is what we...
Yes. But our problem is then that we have to do something about that. So let's see what happens if we make this a DST X naught DST. Sorry, we want the digit number, which is DST digit number value. So if we say DST 1 x0 there, what does that do? So that will then read a 0 and thus work correctly. All of those light up. Happiness ensues. Well, it doesn't actually, because they've got cranberry and vermouth the wrong way around. Oh well, we'll fix that in a bit. So then this one, so then the first thing is 600 DGT 0, and then we attempt to set, so that should do the right thing. Well, more or less, except that we never actually bother. Oh, yes, so then we still need our comparison, which may turn out to be a bit of a problem. Yeah. I mean, like, we can certainly do this by just throwing more registers at the problem. Well, I mean, I say that. Actually, we can't. This is utterly stupid, but I can't use the larger processor because there's no way I could route a track around its right-hand pins without using space that all of these 4 tracks are already using. So, like, if I drop this processor in here, then I'll need to get something from its bottom left pin out of the right-hand side, which means it needs to go around the other pins, but that means it needs to pass through the next row up, which it can't. So that could only work.
You have it over on the left and move those blocks on the left to the top half instead, and therefore have your big block to the left before all 4 of those parallel lines.
Yes. Well, except that the big one has to be at the end of the daisy chain, so that might mean I have to run the entire daisy chain backwards. Maybe it's worth spending a little more time on coding this one before
Before you have to do that.
before I resort to such measures. So, yes, what was worrying me is that essentially, is that we need to decide which of we have to decide which output we're going to use. Hang on, no, this will work, won't it? What we do, so after this step, let's wipe out everything beyond there. After that step, ACK either contains 0, in which case we need to we know that we either emit nothing at all or we emit something from the second byte, or it contains non-zero, in which case we know that we emit something from the first byte and not the second byte. So we can go is ACK 0. If ACK is 0, then if ACK is not 0, then we should immediately throw away the second byte. and then emit a pulse based on the value of ACK, which, since this is from the first byte, will be cranberry, which is P0. If ACK is 0, then we read ACK, extract the low order byte, extract the low order digit, and emit a pulse of vermouth. I think that'll work. Hooray!
So your average for the first thing, a bit above for the second, and quite a lot more lines of code.
A bit above in power usage, but above most of the people in power usage. So what was your power usage? You got lots of things.
It's the number of lines of code executed while running a test.
Okay.
Roughly. I mean, I think other components can use power as well, but it's mostly number of lines of code actually executed. And the production cost is obviously the number of the cost of the parts you need. And like some people manage to do it slightly cheaper, but basically there's a big spike at 1 ROM and however many processors. So Joe says, hey, I wanted to say thanks for sticking with me when things weren't going so hot. I know I was struggling for a while there and came up with some really bad ideas that went nowhere, but I have a better handle on things now, and that's thanks to your willingness to be patient with me. So I really appreciate that. If you wanted, maybe we could get dinner or something sometime. Shortly afterwards, disregard previous message, hit the wrong button again.
Is this a result of sulking the airline cocktails?
I don't know. So I know that hasn't given me any new tasks, so I think they're just saving up the big one, and maybe I should do some more of the earlier ones. In particular, I think device 2A27 is actually a bit of a prelude to the big one. No, not that big one. But maybe it is. In which we have a map of a state space with 2 variables, and we're required to output different results for different areas of the state space. So we have a thing for the Poseidon 779 thorium mining unit actuator control system, 2A27 geometric specifications. Understand, this is a geometric visualization of a state space. The 2A27 actuator control must take a value as shown in the specifications depending on the inputs I was described. Understand, the 0 value area in the middle is required so that the actuator avoids the flux point. Act, create a device that maps given coordinates to the corresponding power value as specified in this geometric visualization. So, let's have a look at that. Lots of lovely space. They don't give us a diagram of the state space here. X and Y are simple inputs connected to an unknown device, presumably some type of position sensor. Power is a simple output connected to an unknown device, presumably some kind of motor or high power switch. Map the XY coordinate to the corresponding power value as specified in Poseidon 779's geometric specifications, which can be found in the supplemental data section of the manual. So more or less what I think it boils down to is if x is less than 20, return 30. If x is between 40, or rather if y is between 40 and 80, if x is between 40 and 60, return 50.
I wonder if this is the most convenient way to visualise this. I see that a left and a right bar that are worth 30.
You're
and
quite
a
right.
square that's worth 50.
And you add them together. You're
yes.
quite right, yes. So actually, yes, I was mostly just trying to write this out so that the stream had some record of what I was trying to do, but I think you have made it clearer that what I should actually be doing is saying if x is less than 20 or x is greater than or equal to 60, p equals 30. If then x is between 40 and 80, and I'm changing my language halfway through, yes, hush. Y is between 40 and 80.
Did you say note time currently one?
Yes. Then p plus equals 50. Jison says, I guess we're out of time to work out whether sabotaging the decentral autonomous corporation with bugs that get past the lousy test suite would be a good idea and what the best bug would be. I'm not sure that sabotaging its thorium mines will be entirely safe. So, that seems like a fairly simple specification. One minor irritation is that we have nothing with 3 simple ports, so we need at least 2 processors for the job. Nothing with 3 analog ports. So if we try to... So our trickiness here is that we need... But they're simple inputs, which actually means we can reread X and Y as necessary. So we never need to store X and Y. So that makes our life really quite simple. I mean, this was quite an early challenge after all. Hey, I'm not. SGT writes reflections on trusting disaffected electronics engineers. We're not as disaffected as Carl is. Right, so we go. So we can fairly easily go like if P naught less than 20 or P naught greater than 59, then do something. More 30 ac. And then if x, well, it doesn't really matter, but so p naught is greater than 39 and p naught is less than 80, and P1 is less than greater than 39 and less than 80, then add 50 morph ac x1, which is all utterly fine except we have to sleep somewhere. Damn it! One instruction out. And then this one just goes morph x naught p1 slip 1. And then that one never sleeps. Because you can we only have 2 analog input-output pins per processor, and we need 2 analog inputs and 1 analog output from the entire board.
Yes, right, sorry, right.
So
I would find this easier to work out if there was just a little transparency so you could see where the tracks go under the chips. Yes, right, sorry. Yes, I understand.
I mean, I could also have routed the tracks so that they didn't go.
Is that doable? Can you go?
Yes, I think the conceit is that you imagine those are conductive metal tracks laid on the circuit board,
Yes,
and then you put the chip on top, and it's got a routing
Yeah.
underneath. So
Okay.
this
So
is
and that's level nothing to do with the output on top right of that.
yeah. That's what this is wired to from Y to P1 on this chip.
So there's why to it.
but the left pins on the left and right aren't necessarily inputs and outputs.
Right.
It's just that you need to put both inputs into things marked P, and it so happens one of them is in the top right, so you can do this slightly contorted maneuver.
I mean, yes, I can do it without having to go under the chip. I could drop a bridge there, and then go around there.
Is that more expensive?
No, bridges are free, bizarrely. I mean, it should be the case that bridges cost money, but tracks are free. Because that's how things are in the real world. So, yes, this is infuriatingly more or less correct, but not actually going to work because I need one more instruction in that processor. And I've got plenty of space in this one, so what I now have to do is move some of the work into the right-hand processor. Which I feel like the right thing is therefore to have one processor that does the base x less than 20 or x greater than 60, and the other one that does the add 50 under suitable circumstances. Except that yeah, that can be done, can't it? If we just remove the ability to set ACK from, we remove the ability to do that bit from that processor and stick it into here. We'll fix out precisely what order the code goes in a moment, and then have this just emit 0 or 50 depending, and then we wire P0 on there to X, then and obviously we then stick a slip 0 at the end of that, and then this one does its usual sums to construct ACK, and then does add X0.
Shouldn't it produce all that?
Do you think that would be helpful? Yes, it might be, mightn't it? I mean, it crashed before then anyway, so I've screwed up somehow. Slip 1 will probably be a better number than slip 0, wouldn't it? Well, that's amusingly not quite right. So it's screwed up on inputs 58 and 59.
What do you need into ACK when you're not moving 50 into it?
Yeah, wouldn't that be sensible? Yeah, that would be sensible, wouldn't it? I should move 0 into ACK at some point. How about that?
Roughly convincing.
In the lowest bar of all of them, despite the fact that I didn't have to use any features that we got told about later.
Well, I think this one might be this one might have been a spotting the pattern in the problem domain. Possibly.
Yes. So what you're claiming is it's entirely down to you that I got the good result.
Well, I mean, I only needed to say and then you spotted it, so I'm sure it would have been. But I suspect the people who took ages were not like connecting all the components of the wrong order. They just were having a much bigger look up table.
Right. So now we have moderately dodgy semi-military things for Lily Wu, or the big one. And this cryptocurrency deposit terminal. That one's only slightly evil. So, has non-blocking XBus input connected to card reader, 3 simple binary inputs that just detect bills, an XBus output to the network interface that we send data to. Well, that seems fairly simple. User initializes a transaction by inserting their account card, inserts money as indicated by the cash signals, finalises the transaction by ejecting their account card indicated by a value of -1 from the card reader. When the transaction is finished, the 8-digit account number and the total amount of the deposit should be transmitted over the network. This kind of assumes that no one ever tries to deposit more than 999 yuan, because if they do that, we will be unable to transmit that. And from the spec, it looks like we get 1 time unit pause between each cache input. So, I mean, obviously this is meant to be done with one of those. And then we're going to need some RAM to stash the account number in. Do we get told the length of an account number? 8 digits. Which is inconvenient for avoiding needing to wire up the address port of the RAM. Though if we had a different processor do each of them, they could each use a different port of the RAM anyway. And then we could just be like write 8 digits in, read 8 digits out. So the question is, can we do this? As if we try to do it with an M... Oh no, but now we've got something that has 4... We're going to need a total of 5 X-Bus connections, because we need 1 for this, 1 for the card reader, 2 for the RAM, and 1 for the network. So that kind of suggests 2 processors anyway. So let's imagine we've miraculously built most of this device. And we have something that... Actually, let's make it wait on X2 because I think that's more conveniently positioned. And imagine a signalling protocol where the input processor writes an account number. Actually, maybe we can do this without bothering with the address bus. This is kind of inconvenient because I think if I do it with 2 processors, I don't need to wire up the address ports of the RAM. If I do it with 1 processor, I do. Because it can just wait for a signal from the input processor. When it receives that, read... I habitually write my loops counting downwards, but with this processor there's no good reason to write loops counting downwards because it doesn't have a 0 flag anyway. So let's have loops that count upwards and are thus human intelligible. So then we just read 8 bytes from the RAM to the network. And then write out the amount of money. So that as a thing for doing the output side seems pretty nice. And then essentially all this needs is for us to at some point write the account number into this port of the RAM. We just rely on the fact that the 2 address pointers will remain in sync, because one side writes 8 bytes and the next side reads 8 bytes, and then something needs to write write the account number into the RAM and write the amount of money down this X-Bus port. I think this is going to need a big processor for the amount of code we're going to need, but we'll see. Okay, I've positioned this wrongly. That'll do. So the first indication that something interesting is happening is that the XBus reader stops returning minus 999. So at that point it returns us so that then returns us that means now we got the first byte of the account number in the accumulator. Let's stick it in DAT instead. Because then we could use the accumulator. Well, I suppose we could use the accumulator for counting anyway in a moment. So we send DAT to the RAM.
I keep wanting to do which is called this. To go with that.
Right, so that's the rather complex code that just reads the yeah, maybe we need to split this into two processes again. That just reads the account number and squirts it into the RAM. But then we have to wait for how do we read? So this could return. This will probably, if you believe, I think it has only one cache slot and it signals one of those signals when a note comes in. So we can guarantee that there will only be one of 4 values read from the.
I got very confused then until I realised you were spelling cache slot the other way.
Yes. That means that we only have to read. We can only get 0, 1, 10, or 100 from X1, and actually, if you look at the traces we've got on this board, everyone is very diligent about how they insert their money. They do it precisely in alternate clock cycles. They do them in rather odd orders, but in all cases, I was just wondering if we can avoid bothering to detect the no one is inserting any money at the moment signal. I think we can't quite, because people take differing amount of times to insert their first banknote. So that then means we have to check the input signal against all of things. Okay, Claire wants to know what on earth am I blithering about. So this is officially the cryptocurrency deposit terminal. You get a card number over an XBus port, and then 3 simple inputs which indicate what values of banknotes are being inserted. And only one of those appears to ever be asserted at once. And we are to get the card number the moment the card is inserted, count the money as that's inserted, and then when the card is removed, which signals with a -1 over the card reader port, transmit card number followed by a total amount of money inserted down the network port. And so what I've built so far is this bit, which I'm pretty confident reads the card number from the RAM and an amount from X2 and squirts it out over the network. And I've got this bit which reads the card number from the card reader and injects it into the RAM. And I'm pretty sure those bits work correctly. So there it is, writing the card number into the RAM. And then were it not for the fact that nothing actually signals, I suppose what we could do then, yeah, but it'll send it at the wrong moment then, is go mov null x2 to demonstrate that the second processor does the right thing as well. So then we get a great big, hang on, you aren't meant to be transmitting a network packet at this moment, whinge from the verifier. But it transmitted something at about the right moment. It transmitted what we were expecting. The only problem is that it hadn't actually bothered to wait for the user to insert any money. And the problem is that that's already rather a lot of code. I mean, I'm kind of just wondering what happens if you do this. Right, so it looks like the RAM doesn't explicitly read from a non-blocking X-bus, so you don't just end up filling the RAM with the card number directly, or rather with -999 followed by the card number. Right. But, like, how am I going to fit into the 3 remaining instructions here all of the stuff for counting in the money? So it kind of feels to me like what I actually want is to separate card reader handling from cache handling. So I think I want one processor that talks to the card reader and one processor that talks to the cache counter. Sorry, typing in IRC. Right, yes, I think I need to split this up. So how could we have that would be particularly stupid, and no, that won't work. I was going to say maybe we can just use a simple signal just use an analog signal to transmit the amount of cash. That will surely be fine. But that won't work because analogs. I suppose I could divide. No, I don't. We can't do division. Damn it. Oh, but I don't have to do division. I add 2, 5, and 10 rather than 20, 50, and 100. That's fine. We don't ever have to divide because we simply don't count that low digit, and then we just multiply by 10 before output. We know that they can't insert more than 999, so we can fit it in an analog signal. Right, excellent. And yes, it'll occasionally give them a slightly different amount of money from what they inserted, depending on like the temperature of the processors. So yes, so that would be completely stupid, so that's obviously what I should do. Well, it has the convenient feature that then the cache processor just sits there counting cache and oh, hang on, no, that doesn't work. Something has to reset the cache processor, of course, and tell it stop counting. Or rather, reset your counter to 0, because otherwise it will just keep counting. So it does still need to have some understanding of... Oops, Stoats. It does still need to have some understanding of when a transaction is complete. Obviously, if we had numbers that just wrapped around like sensible people, then we wouldn't need to do that, and it could just keep counting up, and the transaction processor could handle remembering what the value was at the start of the transaction and subtracting that from the end for the end. But sadly, our numbers saturate, which I'm sure is generally good for avoiding stupid bugs, or at least turning your stupid bugs into reasonable bugs.
I mean, in a financial processor, well, you'd probably rather saturate at 999 than wrap round into minus 999.
Yes.
Well, you've given all your money away. Obviously, you'd rather do neither, but...
Yes. Obviously, what it should do is to halt and catch fire at that point. So... But we can have that. We could actually have a simple. We could have a connection between the two processors that's a pair of simple input outputs, which would be stupid. Have one of them signal, "Now it's time for you to tell me how much money you've got." I suppose actually then we could use an X bus for actually transmitting the amount of money.
I mean, supposedly this thing is supposed to be dealing with digital currency. It appeals to my sense of irony to use analog signals in the middle for no reason.
But actually I don't think I need to, because actually what I do is I signal it, since the cache processor has to be able to be reset, it has to have some signal to say end of transaction, at which point it may as well send an X-bus packet that contains the amount of money we've got. Indeed, it can send that straight to the output processor.
Right, good night.
Night. Right, so that then ends. Then we need that ends up being mauve. particularly stupid way to do this, but it'll probably work. Only that's not even slightly correct, because at this point what it actually needs to do is wait until we get a 0 from the card, a -1 from the card reader. Which is like that's obviously stupid in like 15 ways, but it'll probably work. So then this one just has a job of doing it's going to be one of these. I haven't got the room for the sleep, isn't it? Because then I need to sleep 1. But this can actually be solved by being slightly cleverer here. So rather than doing a bunch of TEQs, we can say is x naught greater than 0? If x naught is greater than 0, then it is either 1, 10 or 100. If it is not, then jump to right. If it is greater than 0, then see whether it's how it compares to 100 to 10. If it's equal to 10, then add 50. If it's less than 10, then before we add 50, we should subtract 30. If it's... oh damn, it still doesn't fit. And then I wanted to add another instruction. If it's greater than 10, then in addition to adding 50, add another 50. But sadly, that doesn't fit either. There's some other silliness we can do. This one is so close to being able to fit in this processor. And the blocking nature of XBus is inconvenient in this respect. I mean, we can have two things listening to the card reader. But that's going to be awkward because while we can have the account processor not listen once it's read the card number, we can't have this one not listen really, because it's only by listening to the card reader that it knows when anything's happening, so that doesn't really work. So, I mean, I think a simple connection between them is the right way to signal end of transaction. So, another interesting thing. Okay, how about we try this? This is another stupid way of doing this. If we go add x0, which will be correct for 0 and 100. If x0 is 10, add another 40. If x0 is 1, add another 19. Well, that fits. Okay, let's see what this does. It appears to work. Well, that was a surprise. Okay. I was expecting slightly more bugs than that. I'd kind of not even remembered whether I'd left the first processor in a sane state. Like, I just stopped programming that one because it looked roughly right and went on to program the other one. It's even a reasonably efficient solution. I'm less than modal production cost and lines of code. Largely, I think I'm less than modal lines of code because I'm less than modal production cost. Well, yes, we need to ship it before the crypto crash of 2026 happens. Because, like, I've completely stuffed my two processors with code. Carl is, yes, being entirely justifiedly cynical about, well, everything really. Right. So it's 2301. Do I go back to working on the big thing, or do I do some even more suspicious, the two remaining dubious military applications? Any opinions? Jacob says kaboom, which I think means he wants me to try to have another go at this. Right, what was it doing again? Meanwhile, Pink Beast wants dubious military applications. I need a casting vote, please. the terribly complicated tracking badge that will that plays sound that's sent to it and which listens to radio signals and works out where it is and transmits back information about where it is, or a couple of fairly simple things but that are one kind of police thing and one kind of military thing.
Are these things that you both do eventually? Do you have to choose?
I don't know. The big thing is the culmination of all our work so far. The other two are rather like
The big thing that sounds more suitable. Is that the tracking badger? Is that a badger?
yes.
If I had a badger, go for a badger.
Okay, right, we'll do the badger. Yes, nothing interesting I don't think anything interesting is yet happening in my camera view. Indeed, no vehicles appear to ever move, so... or people. I'm kind of suspicious. Right, so... we have this awkward layout of things. Of areas that we need to detect. So we've so far got the sound bit working correctly, haven't we? Yes. So when we receive a sound packet, we correctly, well, kind of correctly, emit that through the speaker. By this thing detecting that we've got a sound packet, squirting the actual contents of the sound packet into there, and then sending a signal down X2 that essentially says, please play the sound that's currently sitting in the RAM. And that seems like a perfectly sane design, except that we need to have the same... we need to also look for other interesting... we also need to look for the other kind of packet from the network, from the radio. So then our problem was working out where we are. And so this thing at the moment just records our two coordinates, our phi and our r and our theta into two registers. But then we have to make some complicated decision to work out our current which one of the zones we're in. And one of the questions is essentially, how does that... how do we pass that knowledge on to the control processor? Because obviously we will transmit our current location we have to record our current location and be able to transmit it at an appropriate moment. Now we don't actually need to record two numbers for that, because we could live translate it into the zones on the chart. But we do need to... still need to record it somewhere. And then transmit it to over the radio on demand. And so the slightly awkward thing here is how we do that without spending an utter fortune. Like, so how do we signal? Does this thing, do both of them read the radio? That's going to be messy. I suppose this one essentially doesn't need to do anything. As in, this one could perfectly safely sleep waiting for a signal to say, here is an audio packet. But the thing is, we need most of that code if we're going to do that. Like that bit. Is all going... I mean, I think it would be better to actually use the byte count if we can. But that code, that bit is all going to be needed. But then the other section should be fairly simple. So our big problem there is simply not having enough space. You're not having enough X-bus ports. Because we need to connect up our identity and radio receive and transmit and all the things that relate to audio, which is probably 2 ports, and something to get the data from the radar, which is blatantly too many. So that does probably mean we want to split the job between 2 processors just to get enough X-bus ports. So this one should, I think, receive over 1 X-bus port an audio packet and handle stashing that in RAM and then waking up the output processor. That feels messy. Can we not put the entire audio system into 1 processor? Feels like we should be able to. Let's see if we can build an MC6000 which does all the audio processing. So if we imagine that it expects to receive on, say, X0 a byte count followed by each of the bytes, and it expects X2 and X3 to be wired up to a RAM in the obvious fashion. So that code there obviously copies a packet without copying the length byte. Let's fix that. Copies a packet including length byte into the RAM. Reset the pointer to the beginning. Start writing out. No, sorry. Read the length we need. Write out 1 byte. Actually, probably the same way we did before. See if we've reached the end of the loop already. Write out 1 byte. Sleep 1. Jump to the beginning of the output loop. Sorry, sleep 1, sub 1. Jump to the beginning of the output loop. eventually fall through from there. Our only slight problem is that we never reset the address pointer button. That's fine, we can simplify this. We don't... We instead keep the accumulator at the actual byte count we want, and we take advantage of the fact that we can read the address of from the RAM. So instead of our test being teak ACK0, it's teak x3 ACK. There's a slight problem here, but actually we can ignore that as well. We don't bother writing the accumulator to the RAM because now we can keep it in the accumulator. Then we don't have to do that because the loop counter is handled for us by the RAM. Then we reset. Don't have to do that because the loop counter is already in ACK. We change that to teak x3 ACK. We then copy that out, sleep 1. We don't have to sub 1. And then finally mob 0 x3 to reset the RAM. Right, plenty of space. So then this thing can, I think, replace these two devices. And then we change the design of this so that when, rather than mov x0 null, it sends it to x3, shift that loop termination, that. So then, and then we don't need that mov null x2 anymore. Right, so I think that probably means we've got the audio processor rebuilt in a way that only requires one X-bus port on this chip rather than two. And it's not quite right, but it's not far off. The audio processor is now correct again, and only consumes one X-bus port from the processor that's connected to the radio, and requires less code in the processor that's connected to the radio, and I haven't even made any efforts at optimizing that yet. In particular, it should probably use the byte count rather than anything else. Right, so now what else does, so if we're going to keep this processor here, it probably needs two connections to the radio and a connection to this thing and a connection to that thing, which is obviously more connections than it can have. So how should it... deal with that. I mean, now it's essentially, it can have a cycle that it runs every clock tick. But yes, our problem is, I mean, I presume it doesn't work to do that. No, we get complaints if we do that. I mean, we could have a, like, actually, I wonder if we should just have a tiny radio processor whose job is to convert our non-blocking radio to a blocking radio with only one port. I mean, that would be quite a small device, really. I mean, like, we could do that in an MC4000X. And that would gain us... So if you imagine we did this and then wrote a simple thing that went... So that just copies an entire radio packet to X0. And then... It's not quite right, because I want then to say... Having copied the packet, do we then always wait for a packet to transmit, whether or not we sent one? It's probably not quite what we need. So I probably want to say on the first time around the loop, don't this is going to be slightly too complicated, because I need to conditionalize whether we transmit based on whether we get, say, minus 999. You know, we want X0 ACK. I suppose we could, no, yeah, ooh. So that's a very crude design of radio processor that reduces the radio requirement, the radio, to only needing a single X-bus port rather than two of them. Let's just move it further to that side. So that it's tidy. So, right, now we need simple connection to each of those, X-bus to the radio. Hang on, what? Have I reached the point where actually, if I'm clever, I can do this with one processor? Surely not. I'm going to need lots of space to do that lookup table, surely. Okay, the fact that thing just keeps writing ones is not helpful. Yeah, so that actually needs to remember to mov x2 act slightly more often, which runs us out of instructions again. Curses. Thing is, yes, actually the radio transmit doesn't really need. I think we discard that idea. And we go back to having radio receive wired like that. And we wire radio transmit to a completely different processor. So like should have radio transmit wired to this processor, say, while radio receive is wired to this one. I think this will work. Well, maybe. Right, so that's got the audio bit working again. So then the idea here is that this processor is mostly set up like this, and then it has some way of signalling back to that one, which we will worry about in a bit. And what it actually signals back to this one is it's now time for you to transmit your location, and this one can then have an X-bus connection that does something like that. So that should just behave the same. Ooh. Why has that crashed? Oh, because now it thinks we now also need to go. I mean, the first byte only actually has 3 possible values. The problem is that, as usual, the TCP instruction probably doesn't do what we wanted. Actually, we can probably simplify that a bit. So let's just check whether this works. That receives a 2, it therefore jumps to X, which then what? I think that's what I was expecting. Drop a breakpoint there so we can test this. So we should receive 2 from the radio, which we copy into DAT. And then we teak 558, yes, right. And we would signal our location. I mean, if we make that a plus NOP instead, then we can prove that that's happening. And then that packet we should not attempt to transmit. Yes, so that's working right. It's just we've only got 2 instructions left to actually transmit our location in, which is not many. Or rather, we have 2 instructions in which to send a signal to some other processor that it should transmit our location. What we could do, in order to be able to use an X-bus port for that, because if it's going to, the other processor is going to have 2 of its 2 simple inputs tied up with the radio, is we could arrange, since this is our sleep 1 that we get to every time, we could arrange to always send it a signal saying whether or not it should transmit its current location. So we could have this go... so one thing I was going to say is we don't really need that jump S to be there, because we can safely fall through to this. We'll read -999 from the radio, however we get to here. Which incidentally also means that we do actually need to only check if dat is equal to 1, because if it's minus 999, we can treat that as though it's a request for location packet, which will return an ID requested of minus 999, which isn't us. So we actually only need to do that, and then jump S. S then ends up being here, and then essentially here we just have two instructions which are like mov 0x1 mov 1x1 minus mov 0x1. There we go. So we then just send a signal out of x1 every time step that is, do we need you to transmit your location? And then what this one does is it buggers around with those things. Hello, Bat. Good night, Bat. And then rather than doing slip1, it goes is x2 0, if not mov, well, something rubbish. Mov 666 x3. So each time around it reads x2, by which time this thing has decided whether it's got an interesting radio packet. Well, that didn't work. What's gone wrong there? They expect us to be running an awful lot of instructions between our sleeps, don't they? Come on. Admit that something's stuck. Nothing here looks like it should be stuck, which is probably why the... Oh, we're at a breakpoint, you idiot. Harris. Right, well that's looking pretty good. We now correctly transmit a packet at the right moment. The packet contains rubbish. And we could even make it transmit an answer that's right sometimes. You know, if we have it transmit 202 instead. There we go, we get a bit further through the sim before everything fails. So now all we need is for this processor, which could be reduced to an MC4000 if we have, if we can fit the code in, but I bet we can't. I'm sure I can reduce the size of that one a bit. Just wondering if I can do something like subtract the things and just send the result out down there. But the thing is that subtraction is actually quite expensive, because you have to do mov thing ac sub thing mov thing, which is 3 instructions, which is how much we're having to spend on that anyway. Can't see any way to do that in fewer than 3 instructions. Just wondering if we could, because that one actually only uses its X-bus ports, so that one could be an MC4000X if we could get the program small enough. Actually, we no longer need to mov that into DAT, do we? Because we only ever used DAT once, so that allows us to throw away one instruction. Right. How many more instructions do we need to excise? 2. So at the moment, so that's, is this a sound packet? If not, jump to S. Otherwise, we remove the first byte. Let's change this to, so hang on, let's, then each subsequent, well, that's obviously stupid. The first byte can't turn out to be minus 999 either. So we can remove that instruction. So if we were to do this instead by having a counting accumulator, then this would end up being mov x3 ac for the first one, and then on each loop teak ac 0 sub 1. So actually this is cheaper. It's kind of a pity that we need 3 instructions for it. I mean, like, now we're incidentally doing this probably the most proper way, in that this processor doesn't understand the contents of sound packets. So it will copy any trailing data that comes after the official length of the packet. But this one does understand the contents and only plays out the correct count of bytes. Both of these sections use the condition code, so I don't think I can get away without that jump there. Like, I don't think we can just conditionalize one entire branch. Or can we? What if I made that a TCP? Then those will become pluses. But we thus have no minus qualified instructions in there. So then if we had this, now that wouldn't work, because we'd still hit that. Oh, but AC is almost always minus 999, isn't it, once the system's got going? Might be an interesting fact. I feel that relying on the fact that our tests start with a sound packet is probably not going to be helpful. just feels flappy. But I don't think we can do any better. I mean, like, either of them could... and, like, yeah, we have to do it on both... We have to send something in both cases. And we need... If we're going to do it by stupid subtraction tricks, then we have to, like, waste time mobbing into the accumulator and then subbing and then sending, and that's 3 instructions anyway. Yeah, so close to being able to fit that in an MC4000X. We're only 1 instruction over. Oh well, let's go and have a look at the other problem. So that one works, except it doesn't actually manage to do any of the evaluation. So let's give ourselves some space to work in. So essentially, now that should behave just the same. It always transmits the wrong answer. So we now need to replace this MOV202X3 with something that evaluates AC and DAT and makes a decision based on them, and writes the result of that decision out to X3. We can do this, surely we can. So first, if hang on, let me add a little notepad. AC is P1. No, AC is P1 is sync. Dat is P0 is ping. Right, so if ping is greater than or equal to 80, we always emit the same answer. So one problem here is that I haven't got a spare register to accumulate results in, which might make the conditionals easier. Because otherwise I end up having to go like yes. Because I'm using 2 registers to store where we are, we can't division, and we can't. Yes, because I'm using 2 registers to store where we are. I can't use any registers in this code, unless possibly I can be confident I won't be asked for my position twice within 1 radar sweep. But that seems really rather optimistic. Like, we've definitely got 2 questions in the same radar in the same sweep here. It's just it happens that only one of them refers to us. But maybe we can actually write, because sync and range, sync and ping is guaranteed to be under 100, I think. Certainly all the samples we've got are under 100. So and sync is 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. There. It's annoying that it reaches 100. So I was wondering if we could just pull the middle digit out of sync, but annoyingly it can be 0 or 100, both of which have the same middle digit. Because I was hoping that by using that we could encode our entire sync and ping consistently into 3 digits, which we could then do something with. So I'm getting confused by all the numbers here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible pointers. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yeah, okay, that's reasonable, isn't it? Is it cheating to cut and paste the Chinese characters from this into an online translator? Obviously not. So the 600 zone, Papago translates as harbour. The 100 zone, it translates as a government building. The 202 zone is probably please stay in simplified Chinese, residential and commercial district. And the 700 zone, don't know if this helps with the programming mind. Industrial area. So it looks like this is actually more or less a town that we're locating people in. With a government building in the centre, a harbour to the north, and then the residential district surrounded by the industrial district. Anyway, yeah, this is just going to get far too complicated if we need like 3 instructions per zone. I mean, possibly it's something like we do a range check to get that 100. But like, problem is that yeah, it's getting 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4 out of something that's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 is kind of awkward when we don't have shift right and we don't have divide. We can shift by whole numbers of decimal digits. Oh, well, I suppose you could do multiply and then extract decimal digits, couldn't you? So if we took our 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 and multiplied them by 5, we are 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 and multiplied them by 5. So sync is P1. If we then did plus mul 5, then we get things that are in the top digit 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we could even do digit get 2. So then they're just that in the accumulator. I mean, I don't quite know what we're going to need those numbers for, but that would allow us to get out the number to add in the 200 ring. So if I do that, we presumably pass the first 2 tests. Yes. Oh, like that's going pretty well. It can detect 2 of the zones, zoned 202 and 100. Here's my even stupider plan. Right. Now it can detect all of the zones except for 600 and 700, which it still thinks, 600 it emits as 199, and 700 it emits as one of 200, 201, 202, or 202, 203, or 204. Sadly, we've only got one instruction left to do the rest of that in. So that section is still going to need some more fiddling to try to get the plus it corrupts the accumulator occasionally. How low can radar ping go? We're not told. Just below 50 and presumably above 0. Yes. So we can't. I was wondering if we could trust radar ping to always give a positive logic signal, and we might be able to use that for something. Obviously, what we want is a sample and hold or something. And if we had a processor with 4 simple connections, then we could use that as a sample and hold. But we haven't. On the other hand, now we have successfully reduced radar sync to a single digit. We can squeeze it into one register if we really need to, but we're not actually, while we are slightly short of registers, we're much more short of code space. Or I wonder if maybe the right thing is something like split this into two processors, one of which just reads the radar sync and radar ping signals, and every cycle transmits our current sync and ping to a second processor, possibly with some pre-cooking, and then the second processor handles translating that into an actual location and firing it off to the radio. And like we might rearrange that a bit. Maybe not much actually. But I don't think, since it is 1 minute to midnight, that there is time to do that tonight. So we've made some progress in that we have most of the design and the radio interface is looking sane. And we've kind of got a division of labour between processors, and that one is irritatingly one instruction too big to be able to be crammed into an MC4000X. That one, on the other hand, pretty much definitely needs an MC6000. So yes, next time I think we need to rebuild this area and possibly split it into two processors. Meanwhile, good night, because I think that is quite enough for now, even though we only accomplished... What did we accomplish? We finished accomplishing the airline cocktail mixer, didn't we? Because that worked rather nicely. In a kind of particularly stupid way. And we accomplished the cryptocurrency deposit terminal, which was actually slightly elegant. And we didn't yet accomplish the big one. So we'll probably be able to finish that in the next session, and then we'll see where things go after that, because there are several pages of supplementary data that we haven't encountered yet. But we will see. So, I suppose, good night.